I remember the first time I saw him on campus like it was yesterday, even though it's been years. He was leaning against the brick wall outside the student union, headphones on, one leg propped up like he didn't have a care in the world. I had just moved into my dorm, still lugging boxes of books and bedding, and honestly, I was already exhausted from the first week of classes. But there was something about the way he laughed at whatever was playing through his earbuds that made me stop in my tracks. He wasn't conventionally handsome. He had a crooked smile and a bit of a lazy posture, but there was this undeniable energy about him, a kind of magnetic pull. I caught myself staring longer than I should have, and that's when he looked up and noticed me. He smiled, and my chest just sank. I don't even know if I've ever felt that way before. I wasn't one to go after people, really. I'd always been cautious with my heart, protective of myself, which is probably why it shocked me so much that I walked straight up to him and said something utterly ridiculous about how I needed directions to the library. He chuckled, gave me directions, but then lingered just a second longer than necessary, like he didn't want the conversation to end. That was the spark, I guess, though at the time it felt nothing like sparks. It just felt easy, comfortable, safe. We started seeing each other casually at first. Coffee dates in the little cafe near campus, walks around the quad when the leaves were turning, staying up way too late talking about random things, music, professors we secretly hated, movies that no one else seemed to get. He was smart, but not in a show-offy way. He had this ability to make everything seem lighter, like he could hold your attention with just a shrug or a half smile. I fell for him hard, maybe too hard. I was aware, of course, of the subtle red flags, but I told myself they weren't red flags, they were quirks. And honestly, the thought of losing him terrified me more than confronting any doubts. By the time sophomore year rolled around, we were inseparable. I could tell my friends thought he was too good to be true, but I brushed it off. I was in love, the kind of head-over-heels love that makes you ignore everything else, including logic. He introduced me to his friends. I met his family during breaks, and everything about us felt like a story we were writing together. We even started talking about the future. Not in a pushy, high-pressure way, but in that quiet, subtle way where dreams start to feel tangible because someone else believes in them too. Junior year was when things really got intense. We moved in together in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment near campus. Our walls were paper-thin, but we didn't care. We spent nights arguing about which way the pictures should hang, laughing over cereal at midnight, and sharing playlists like they were sacred texts. I felt like we were building a life before we'd even left college. Every time he touched me or laughed at one of my stupid jokes, I felt this fierce, protective attachment that scared me a little. I was terrified of letting anyone else in my heart after what I'd been through in high school. But with him, it felt like I didn't need to protect myself. He was my shield and my weakness all at once. And then the first real crack appeared. It wasn't a fight, not exactly. It was subtle, something I didn't recognize immediately. I noticed his phone would buzz late at night, but he always had an excuse. Sometimes he'd get defensive if I asked who it was, and I'd swallow the suspicion, convincing myself I was being paranoid. I started noticing him being distracted during our conversations, laughing at messages when no one else was around. I wanted to confront him, but I didn't. I wanted to believe that the guy who had made me feel so safe, so seen, could never betray me. I told myself that love wasn't about doubt, it was about trust, and I trusted him completely. Senior year should have been the culmination of everything we'd built together, the last hurrah before graduation. Everyone talked about how stressful it was, how people were changing, moving, figuring out life, but I felt confident. I had him and he had me. We were the couple everyone admired, at least on the surface. People would say, "You guys are goals," and we'd smile because honestly we thought we were. It was effortless to show the world that we were perfect for each other. But behind closed doors, I started noticing little things that made me uneasy. It started with friends mentioning seeing him out with someone I didn't know. I brushed it off initially, telling myself college is social, people meet friends all the time. But then I saw the texts he'd hastily delete when I walked into the room. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted proof, solid proof, because my gut was screaming at me and my heart refused to believe it. The tension grew, but I rationalized it. He was stressed with job applications, senior projects, everything piling on. The first undeniable moment came during spring break. He had told me he was meeting his friend from another state for lunch, something spontaneous and innocent, and I didn't think twice. But a friend from my dorm called me later, whispering, practically panicked, that she had just seen him across town holding hands with a girl I didn't know.
I felt my chest tighten in a way that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I didn't. I sat frozen in my apartment, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it. I didn't want it to be real. When he came back, he was bright-eyed, chatting about how the lunch went, asking about my trip home. I could barely form words, but I asked him directly, voice shaking, if he had been with someone else. He laughed, awkwardly, brushing it off. "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous." I wanted to believe him. I wanted the world to realign itself and tell me I was wrong. But deep down, something inside me knew that it wasn't ridiculous at all. I didn't confront him further at that moment. I started watching him closely, noticing every little detail. The way he would flinch at sudden knocks on the door. The way he suddenly became glued to his phone when someone messaged. The way he avoided eye contact when I brought up future plans. It tore me apart. I had trusted him with everything, my heart, my future, my self-worth, and now doubt was creeping in like a poison. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to admit that my safe world was crumbling, so I stayed. The breaking point came one night in early May. We were supposed to be celebrating the end of finals, just the two of us, at a little rooftop bar downtown. It was warm, the city lights twinkling, and I felt that old flutter in my chest, the one that made me believe everything was fine. But then his phone buzzed. I hadn't noticed that he'd left it face down on the table. I saw a message preview pop up. "Can't wait to see you tonight," from a name I didn't recognize. I don't know if I gasped or if it was a silent scream inside me, but everything in that moment felt like it stopped. I confronted him right there, my hands shaking, my voice breaking. I demanded to know who the message was from, why he was lying to me, and he froze. There was no smooth denial, no convincing lie, just silence. And in that silence, I felt everything collapse. The love, the trust, the years I had poured into him.
He finally admitted it, finally whispered that he had been seeing someone else for months, someone he had met in one of his classes. My stomach turned, my hands felt like they were filled with ice, and all I could hear was the thumping of my own heart in my ears. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there, numb, as the city lights blurred into streaks. I kept asking why, and he kept muttering about confusion, about how he didn't know what he wanted, how it wasn't supposed to happen. None of it made sense. None of it softened the blow. I had trusted him completely, and now, in an instant, I realized that everything I thought was real had been an illusion. I left that night, walking home under streetlights that seemed too harsh, too bright, revealing every shadow, every lie. I didn't call him, didn't look back, just walked. I felt hollow, betrayed in ways I didn't even know existed. The apartment felt empty when I returned, though he was still there, waiting, probably expecting me to scream, cry, beg. But I had no tears left, just this gnawing ache that settled in my chest and refused to leave. It's funny how someone can be your entire world, the one person you trust more than anyone else, and then suddenly, they're a stranger who has walked right through the foundation you built. I wanted answers, closure, understanding, but mostly, I wanted the person I loved to be real, the version I thought I knew. And that version didn't exist. By the time graduation rolled around, the damage was done. I pretended, as most do, because everyone else was celebrating, taking pictures, moving their tassels, but inside I was unraveling. The person I had loved and trusted had shown me a truth I wasn't ready for, and I didn't know how to reconcile it with the years of love I had poured into him. Every laugh we shared, every promise, every quiet moment we thought was ours alone, now felt like a lie. Looking back, I realize now that it wasn't just the cheating, it was the betrayal of the belief I had in him, the trust I had placed so blindly. It shattered not only my relationship, but my perception of love itself. I stayed, hoping for an apology I wasn't sure would come, for a person I no longer recognized. And even as I moved forward after graduation, even as I tried to rebuild myself, that year lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. After graduation, I thought leaving campus would make everything easier. I imagined that once I was out of the bubble of our shared college life, the betrayal would feel distant, like a wound that time could dull. But that's not what happened. Instead, the truth followed me everywhere. Every familiar street, every little cafe I used to drag him into, every bookstore where we argued over which novels were better, they all carried echoes of him,
and with them the gnawing, twisting ache of what he'd done. I moved back to my hometown, a mid-sized city in the Midwest, and tried to find a routine. I got a job at a marketing firm, settled into a small apartment with mismatched furniture that reminded me painfully of the one we'd shared. I had friends who tried to keep me busy, who suggested nights out, brunches, hiking trips, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was carrying someone else's betrayal like a second skin. At work, I forced myself to focus, to write emails, prepare campaigns, make small talk with colleagues, but every time my phone buzzed, even innocuous notifications made my chest tighten. It was like I was waiting for him to pop up, for some part of my old life to collide with my new one, even though I didn't want it to. The thing about heartbreak like that, it doesn't hit in a clean, cinematic way. It's slow, insidious. It seeps into your daily life until you start questioning everything. I found myself replaying moments over and over. The rooftop bar, the messages I'd seen, the way he froze when I confronted him. I'd ask myself if I had missed other signs, if I had been blind or naive or just too desperate to see the truth. And sometimes, late at night, I would imagine confronting him again, this time with the courage I hadn't had in college, asking all the questions that had been suffocating me since spring break. But then I'd remember, he didn't deserve answers from me, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing how broken I was. A month after moving back, I got a random text from him. Just his name lighting up my screen was like a punch to the gut. I debated ignoring it, deleting it immediately, but curiosity, stupid, toxic curiosity, got the better of me. He was asking if I wanted to meet for coffee. He said he wanted to explain things, make amends. My stomach twisted. I typed a reply, erased it, typed something else, then finally just left it sitting there. I couldn't decide if I wanted to see him to get closure or to remind myself why I had left him behind. A week later, I was walking downtown, late afternoon. The streets smelled like summer, warm asphalt and coffee and something sweet from a bakery I passed. And there he was. Not lurking, not dramatic, just standing there outside a bookstore, sunglasses shielding his eyes. My first impulse was to turn and run, but my feet betrayed me. He noticed me, hesitated, then smiled that same crooked smile that had made me stop in my tracks years ago. And I realized in that moment why I had stayed with him so long, why I had let my guard down so completely. We went to a coffee shop down the street. I don't even remember ordering. I just wanted to hear what he had to say, to see if the person I remembered even existed under the weight of his betrayal. He apologized, finally, fully, with no smirk, no excuse, just apology. He said he had been a coward, that he didn't deserve me, that he'd ruined something beautiful because he wasn't ready to handle love. Listening to him, I wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry all at once. I wanted to forgive him, not for him, but for myself, to feel some sense of peace. But the more he spoke, the more I realized that apology alone couldn't undo years of trust broken, moments lost, and the quiet erosion of my faith and love. I left that coffee shop feeling hollow, but strangely lighter. It wasn't closure exactly. It wasn't a reset. It was the beginning of understanding that some people are only meant to teach you how fragile trust can be. But even then, even walking back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the pang of longing, the confusing residue of what it had been like to believe in him completely. That summer, I tried dating again. Not seriously at first, just small attempts at normalcy, swiping on apps, awkward first dates, dinners with friends who were eager to set me up. But I quickly realized I wasn't ready. Every time someone showed interest, I found myself comparing them to him. Not the person he had been when he cheated, but the person I had thought he was. It was unfair to them, and it was cruel to myself. I wanted someone who could be steady, who could be present, who could be trusted completely, but I didn't know if that was even possible anymore. Work became a refuge, or at least a distraction. I buried myself in campaigns, presentations, late nights at the office. I became the person who people admired for being composed and efficient, but inside I was unraveling. I'd lie awake thinking about what I could have done differently, what I should have seen, what the signs meant.
And sometimes I'd imagined him, what he was doing, who he was with, if he had felt even a fraction of the guilt that haunted me. Then one night, a call came that changed everything. It wasn't him. It was a mutual friend from college, someone I had trusted. She told me something I couldn't have imagined, even in my darkest thoughts. She had seen him recently, dating someone new, someone he bragged about, someone he claimed to love. And she mentioned that he sometimes talked about me, about our time together, how he hadn't done it right, how he missed me. The words didn't bring me comfort. They were a knife twisting deeper. Not because I wanted him back, but because it confirmed that he hadn't changed, that he hadn't really learned from what he had done. The man who had betrayed me still existed, still carried pieces of me around like trophies, while I was trying to rebuild a life from the ruins he left behind. I spent that night walking the city streets, letting the cool air wash over me. I didn't call anyone, didn't text anyone. I just walked. I remember thinking about how strange it was to love someone so completely, to give them everything, and then watch them turn it into nothing. It was surreal, painful, a slow grinding ache that made every step heavier than the last. But also, I realized that I had survived. Somehow, even with everything he had done, I was still standing. I had learned, even if painfully, that betrayal could hurt, but didn't have to destroy me entirely. A few months later, I ran into him again, this time at a networking event downtown. He was with a group of people, laughing, shaking hands, looking like the guy who had once been my entire world. I froze when I saw him. He didn't notice me at first, and for a fleeting moment I thought maybe this time I could just slip past without being seen. But he turned, our eyes met, and in that instant it was like the old magnetism surged back. I wanted to tell him everything, to scream at him for the years I had wasted, for the nights I had cried alone, for the trust I had given freely. But I didn't. I just nodded politely, smiled, and kept walking. That night I realized something crucial. Moving on doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning to walk with it, to carry the memories without letting them weigh you down completely. I thought about all the little ways he had seeped into my life, all the habits, all the songs, all the memories. They would always be there, and that was okay. Because I was still me. I was still capable of loving, still capable of trusting, just more cautiously, more deliberately. I started journaling, writing down my thoughts, my anger, my sadness, even my lingering love. It was therapeutic, letting the words spill onto the page without judgment. Some nights I wrote just to cry, others to scream silently into the paper, and a few to remind myself that I was reclaiming my life. I realized that betrayal doesn't just take from you, it teaches you about the strength you didn't know you had, about boundaries, about resilience. And slowly, life started to feel lighter. I made new friends, found new routines, explored hobbies I had abandoned. I even met someone new at work, a quiet, thoughtful guy who didn't try to rush me, who didn't carry the weight of the past with him. With him, I could laugh again without feeling guilty, smile without flinching at the memory of what had been. I didn't know where it would go, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I was learning to live again, to breathe again, to trust myself before anyone else. Even so, the memory of him, the boyfriend I had trusted completely, lingered. Not in a way that hurt anymore, but in a way that reminded me how much I had grown, how far I had come, and how fiercely I could survive even the most shattering betrayal. I realized that the story of us wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about awakening, about discovering the edges of my own strength, about understanding that love, even when it hurts, is never wasted if it teaches you who you really are. Looking back, I know that the man I loved in college wasn't malicious. He was selfish, immature, and terrified of real intimacy. But he was human. And so was I. I made mistakes, I ignored signs, I let my heart dictate everything. But surviving that, thriving after that, is something that no one can take away. And in a weird, twisted way, I'm grateful. Grateful for the pain, for the betrayal, for the wake-up call that forced me to grow faster than I ever expected. Even after all that time, even after moving on, there were nights when the memories hit me like a freight train. Random, uninvited, impossible to ignore. Sometimes it was a song on the radio, sometimes the smell of a coffee shop, sometimes just the way the city lights bounced off wet pavement. I would freeze mid-step, heart hammering, as if I could somehow turn back time, rewrite every choice I'd made, and prevent the betrayal that had scarred me so deeply. But of course, I couldn't. There was no undoing, only living, and sometimes surviving felt like a full-time job all on its own. I started seeing a therapist that summer, the first time I'd ever considered it seriously. At first, I felt ridiculous, like sitting in a room and spilling my guts to a stranger would somehow make me weaker.
But it didn't. It made me sharper, more aware of my patterns, my blind spots. I realized I had invested too much of my identity into someone else, that I had ignored my intuition because I wanted love to feel safe and perfect. She helped me see that what I had experienced wasn't just heartbreak, it was manipulation in its quietest, most insidious form. And once I labeled it, I could start untangling the knots he had left inside me. Work became my armor. I threw myself into projects, climbed the ladder faster than I expected. But even as I achieved successes, there was this constant low-grade anxiety, like a reminder that the world could still crumble in a single moment. Every time my phone buzzed, every time a friend sent a cryptic message about an old college acquaintance, I flinched. I wasn't paranoid, I realized. I was conditioned. I had been trained by betrayal to notice the tiny, invisible signals that might indicate dishonesty, to feel the weight of someone else's actions long after they had moved on. And then came the hardest test, a reunion. One of those stupid, cheesy college reunions where everyone brags about their career milestones, their perfect relationships, their Instagram-worthy lives. I tried to skip it. I really did. But my best friend from freshman year delted me into going, insisting I couldn't live in the past forever. So I went. And, of course, he was there. Not by coincidence. I knew he'd hear about it through mutual friends, but I hadn't expected the confrontation to feel like it did. I saw him across the room, laughing with people I didn't recognize, the same easy confidence I remembered, but now it felt like arrogance, like a flaunting of a life I had once been part of and was now excluded from. My chest tightened as I navigated the crowd, trying to smile politely, pretending not to notice him. But then he saw me, and everything shifted. His faltered, just for a fraction of a second, the slightest twitch of recognition that made my stomach clench. I wanted to look away, to vanish, but instead I found myself walking toward him. We didn't speak immediately.
Just stood there, circling each other in that way that only people who share history do. And when he finally broke the silence, it wasn't apology, it wasn't charm, it was something else entirely, a mix of regret, defensiveness, and an odd vulnerability that I hadn't expected. He tried to explain, to justify, to tell me that he had been young, confused, unprepared for real intimacy. But I had heard it all before. I had lived it. And I realized something crucial in that moment. I wasn't that naive, heartbroken girl anymore. I didn't need his explanation. I didn't need his redemption. I needed closure on my own terms. We talked for maybe an hour, mostly about superficial things, the campus, mutual friends, the ways our lives had diverged. But every now and then, the conversation scraped at the edges of old wounds. He asked if I was okay, really okay, and I wanted to say yes, to tell him I had healed, but I didn't. I simply nodded and smiled. Because healing isn't about denying pain, it's about walking through it, carrying it, without letting it define you. And that night, as I left the reunion and stepped into the cool night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a quiet sense of triumph. I had survived, not because he had changed, not because I had forgotten, but because I had chosen to reclaim my own life. The weeks after that reunion were a turning point. I started seeing someone seriously for the first time since him, a man named Alex, thoughtful, funny, patient. He was nothing like my college boyfriend. He didn't rush intimacy, didn't demand constant attention, didn't hide behind charm. With Alex, I felt seen and safe in ways I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. But even with him, I had to confront the ghosts of my past. Every time I caught myself comparing, every time I flinched at a joke or a glance, I had to remind myself, this is real, this is different, this is not him. And slowly, ever so slowly, I began to trust again. But then came the call that shattered my fragile peace. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from his sister, a woman I had known casually in college but had remained friends with online. She told me something that made my stomach drop, something I didn't want to believe. He had gotten engaged. Her tone was neutral, almost proud, but I felt something twist inside me, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and an irrational, visceral sadness. He had moved on, built a new life, and here I was, still untangling the mess he had left behind. I didn't know why it hurt so much. I wasn't in love with him anymore. I had someone in my life who made me feel safe and cherished. But the engagement felt like a final eraser of the years we had shared,
the trust I had given, the life I had imagined with him. It was proof that he had fully moved past me, fully rewritten his story without me in it. And in that moment, I realized that part of me had been holding on, not to him, not to love itself, but to the version of myself that had believed in him completely, the girl who had trusted so recklessly and been devastated. I spent that night walking through the city again, trying to process the strange, contradictory emotions swirling inside me. Anger, sorrow, relief, disbelief, they all collided in a mess that made it impossible to sleep. And then, finally, clarity. I realized that his engagement wasn't a threat. It wasn't a judgment. It was just another chapter in his life, a life that I no longer had any claim to. And the real challenge wasn't about him at all. It was about me, about reclaiming the self I had almost lost to love, betrayal, and the illusion of perfection. The healing didn't happen overnight. It never does. There were nights when I cried alone in my apartment, nights when I questioned my worth, nights when I wondered if I would ever trust someone fully again. But there were also mornings when the sun hit just right, when the city felt alive, when I laughed at something trivial and remembered what it felt like to exist without the weight of someone else's deceit pressing on my chest. And slowly, those mornings became more frequent than the nights. I even revisited the places we used to go, coffee shops, parks, the bookstore downtown. But instead of feeling pain, I felt ownership, a sense that these spaces were mine again, mine to move through, mine to reclaim. I walked through them remembering him, yes, but also remembering myself, the person I was before him, the person I had become after. It was surreal, almost cinematic, the way memory and reality intertwined. But it was mine, and that mattered more than anything. One particularly strange moment happened when I ran into an old friend of his at a grocery store. He made casual conversation, dropped the news of their mutual friends, and then out of nowhere asked how I was. I wanted to snap, to lash out, to tell him everything I had been through, but instead I smiled. I said, "I'm good, really good," and I meant it. Not perfect, not untouched, not free of scars, but alive, resilient, present. And for the first time in years, that felt like victory. I realized that life isn't about erasing pain or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about walking forward with it, learning from it, and refusing to let it define you. My college boyfriend had shattered my trust, betrayed my heart, and exposed the fragility of love. But in doing so, he also forced me to grow, to recognize my own resilience, to understand what I truly deserved. And that knowledge became my armor, my shield, my guide. By the time I celebrated my next birthday, I felt like a different person entirely. I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't willing to hand my heart over blindly. I was cautious, yes, but also capable of love that was deeper, steadier, more grounded. I had learned to value myself before giving my trust, to recognize the difference between charm and commitment, between infatuation and genuine care. And that, I realized, was a gift I hadn't known I needed. Even now, when I think back to the boy I met in college, the one I trusted completely, the one who shattered me, I don't feel hatred. I feel clarity. I understand him in ways I didn't then, but more importantly, I understand myself. I know what I can endure, what I can overcome, what I can survive. And I know that no betrayal, no heartbreak, no deception can erase the person I am or the life I am capable of building for myself. I still remember the day I finally let myself laugh freely, the first time in years I didn't feel the shadow of his betrayal lurking behind every thought. It was at a small concert downtown, a local band playing in a crammed venue. I was with friends, genuinely enjoying the music, the chaos, the energy. And for the first time since college, I didn't flinch at the thought of love, at the memory of him, at the scars left behind. I just existed. Fully. Completely. Alive. It took years to get there, longer than I ever imagined, but I realized that healing isn't linear, and survival isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming stronger, wiser, more present, more whole. And in that moment, standing in the crowd, surrounded by music and friends and life, I finally understood that I had truly moved on. Not in the sense that the past was erased, but in the sense that I had reclaimed my story, my trust, and my heart. And that was worth everything.
The years after that concert blurred into a rhythm of work, friends, and life that felt fully my own. I dated casually for a while, eventually finding someone who fit into my world in a way that didn't demand me to change who I was. Alex, the guy I had started seeing seriously, became more than just a partner. He was someone who mirrored the stability I had spent years chasing. We didn't move fast, we didn't make grand declarations, but every shared morning coffee, every walk in the park, Every quiet conversation on the couch reinforced something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Not the safety of ignorance, but the safety of knowing my heart wouldn't be shattered for want of care or honesty. Still, there were moments when the past slipped in, uninvited. A friend would casually mention a wedding, a photo of someone I used to know would pop up in my feed, or the wind would carry the scent of a coffee shop I hadn't visited in years. Each time, I'd pause, take a deep breath, and remind myself I had survived. I had grown. I had learned. And most importantly, I had chosen to keep moving forward, no matter how sharp the memories. Then, one winter afternoon, I ran into him again. Not in some dramatic setting, not in a reunion or a chance event, but at the local bookstore I had been frequenting for years. He was browsing the fiction section, casually flipping through a novel, hair a little longer, eyes the same shade of green I remembered, but the energy around him was different, older, more measured, like he had shed some of the careless charm that had once captivated me. He looked up and froze when he saw me, the faintest flicker of recognition crossing his face. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. I wanted to walk away, to disappear among the aisles and never look back, but I didn't. I stood there, heart racing, breathing deliberately, waiting to see what would happen. And then he smiled, a small, hesitant thing. He said, "Hey, it's been a long time." I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah, it has." We talked for maybe 10 minutes, exchanging brief updates about our lives. He told me he had gotten married, had a job he loved, had moved across the country. I listened, measuring each word, each syllable, aware of the years that separated us now. There was no apology, no plea, no attempt to rekindle anything. And in that, I realized something profound. We were finally complete strangers. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel longing. I felt neutral. I had crossed a threshold that I never thought possible, the place where memories existed without pulling me under, where past wounds could exist without dictating my present. Walking out of that bookstore, I felt lighter than I had in years. The snow was falling softly, blanketing the city in white, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. I understood, finally, that betrayal and heartbreak aren't just about someone else's actions. They're about how you respond, how you reclaim yourself, and how you refuse to let pain define you. And I had done that. Looking back on everything, the college days, the apartment, the rooftop bar, the endless nights of doubt and replayed memories, I realized that every single moment had led me to this point. Every tear, every sleepless night, every pang of longing had taught me resilience, self-respect, and the ability to love again on my own terms. He had taken something from me, yes, but in losing him, I had gained something even more valuable, my own strength, my own voice, and my own life. I moved forward intentionally after that winter day. I traveled, explored new cities, pursued projects I had shelved in my grief. I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I carried it with me. And slowly, quietly, I allowed myself to be happy in ways that weren't contingent on anyone else's presence. I laughed more freely, loved more openly, and trusted more deliberately. The shadows of my past lingered, as all shadows do, but they no longer controlled me. I had made peace with them. One spring evening, Alex and I were sitting on our apartment balcony, watching the sun sink below the city skyline. He reached over and held my hand, and in that moment, I understood fully what I had been chasing all along. Not perfection, not magic, not some idealized version of love, but a sense of calm, of partnership, of being seen and safe in a way that felt lasting. And I realized that I had finally arrived at the place I had been seeking since college. Home, not a building, not a city, not a person, but a state of being that I could carry within myself. I don't think about him every day anymore. When I do, it's with a kind of detached clarity. He was a chapter in my life, intense and unforgettable, but ultimately necessary for the person I became. I learned to trust again, but more importantly, I learned to trust myself, to listen to my instincts, to know that my heart is mine and no one else's.
And as the years pass, I carry that knowledge with me. I carry the memory of what I gave and what I lost, but I also carry the joy of what I reclaimed. Love can hurt, love can betray, but love, real, honest love, can also heal if you let it. And in the end, I let it. Because surviving him, surviving us, wasn't just about enduring heartbreak. It was about finding myself, standing tall, and finally understanding that the person I had been searching for all along wasn't him, it was me. The scars remain, yes, the memories linger, but I am stronger now, wiser now, and finally, truly free. The story ends, but the life goes on, and for the first time since college, I feel like it's all mine.